Protests tonight in El Paso, Texas, after the U.S. Border Patrol says a 7-year-old Guatemalan girl died in their custody. She had not eaten or drank anything for days before her death. Now her family is telling their side of the story. Fox's Jeff Paul reports.
Family members of a 7-year-old Guatemalan girl who died in the custody of Border Patrol is disputing the agency's account of what may have caused her death. Jacqueline Call McKean and her father were among a group arrested on December 6 at the U.S. border near New Mexico. Hours after being placed on a bus by Border Patrol agents, Jacqueline began vomiting and then stopped breathing. She later died at a hospital. U.S. Border Patrol claims she was malnourished and had not had food or water for days before she died. The family says that's not true.
He assured us she was eating and drinking water and that when he got to the border to ask for asylum, they were detained nearly immediately. She had not suffered from a lack of water or food before she got to the border.
This weekend, protests at the Mexican border demanding justice for Jacqueline and her family.
We need an independent, transparent investigation that tells us what happened at the time that she was arrested, while in detention, and when she was provided some kind of care.
The White House, meanwhile, calling the tragedy a result of an unstable situation at the border.
It is a painful reminder of the ongoing humanitarian tragedy that is illegal immigration and the misery that it spreads.
Jacqueline's father reportedly has no complaints about how Border Patrol agents treated him and his daughter, but lawyers are still calling for a thorough investigation. An official cause of death has not been released.
The Border Patrol is seeing a surge in large groups of people illegally crossing the border southwest of Tucson. Groups of sometimes more than 100 people, and there seems to be no end in sight to that border rush. We have more now in tonight's News 4 Tucson Investigators Report.
The majority of the individuals that we've seen are from Central America, and they range anything from young children to family units to elder adults.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection tells the News 4 Tucson investigators dealing with the large groups they've been seeing near Ajo and Casa Grande puts a significant strain on the agency.
Because it requires a lot of agents and resources to be diverted to those areas to deal with these large groups that are coming across.
On December 9th, agents stopped a group of 80 people, mostly Guatemalan nationals, who illegally entered the U.S. west of the Lukeville port of entry. The week before that, agents working out at the Ajo and Casa Grande Border Patrol stations stopped 2 large Central American groups totaling 124 people.
What we see typically is the smugglers that decide where these individuals are crossing the border at. So the smuggling organizations will send these individuals out in these extremely remote areas and putting everybody's lives in danger.
Back on September 4th, Border Patrol apprehended a group of 163 people at the port of Lukeville. 4 days later, 121 people turned themselves over to authorities at the Ajo station. CBP tells the News 4 Tucson investigators the area along the border near Ajo is a prime location for large groups to cross.
The infrastructure that we have in place out there in the West Desert area in the Ajo Casa Grande primarily is going to be vehicle barrier fencing, which is obviously very easily gone through by an individual versus the Nogales or say Douglas areas where we have bollard style fencing.
CBP also tells the News 4 Tucson investigators this is not the first time large groups illegally crossing have been caught in southern Arizona, but this time there is a difference.
For instance, the year 2000, we had a significant amount of apprehensions here in Tucson sector, over 600,000. And those times we did see large groups of individuals. However, the makeup of the groups that we're seeing now is primarily individuals from Central America.
CBP says they will keep doing whatever they can to deal with the influx of large groups in the West Desert, trying to stay one step ahead of the people who profit from human trafficking.
The smugglers that bring these individuals over do not have any regard for human life.
For a breakdown of the numbers of people being apprehended in the Tucson sector, including what countries they're coming from, check out our website, kvoa.com/investigators.
Leftists were out in full force over the weekend ranting about how border agents had killed a 7-year-old migrant girl who died after being caught coming across the border illegally. And the lie detector test determined that was a lie. Hey guys, welcome back to Reality Check on MRC TV. I'm Brittany Hughes. About 72 hours ago, liberals blew up with this story that an illegal alien child had died after she and her father were taken into custody by U.S. Border Protection. 7-year-old Jacqueline Kayal reportedly became ill as she was being put on the bus that would take her group of migrants to a nearby border facility. She was quickly airlifted to a Texas hospital, where she sadly passed away 2 days later. And before the first detail had emerged about why she had died, liberals were out branding border agents Nazi murderers for this little girl's death. Senator Kamala Harris, for example, falsely tweeted that Jacqueline had died in CBP custody of dehydration and exhaustion. That was a lie. Former Bernie Sanders press secretary Erica Andiola tweeted that Jacqueline had died in a border facility icebox. That was a lie. The Women's March plastered Jacqueline's face all over Twitter as their latest political prop. The Congressional Hispanic Caucus has planned a trip to the border station that handled Jacqueline's case and called for a full investigation into her death. But it turns out all of this was bull. Jacqueline's own father later told the Guatemalan consulate that he has no complaints with how Border Patrol treated his daughter, and that they gave her the best medical treatment they could the minute they realized something was seriously wrong. By Monday, medical officials were reporting that Jacqueline had most likely died of sepsis from an infection she'd picked up somewhere along her journey, which Border Patrol couldn't have done anything about. But now see, this is what happens when morons talk about border problems without understanding anything that's actually going on. It's why liberals were so quickly duped into believing that family separation policies were this new Trump phenomenon, even though they weren't. Or why it was so easy for the media to con them with Obama-era photos of kids in cages. Back in 2016, when Obama was still in office and before bleeding heart leftists gave two rips about children dying at the border, I wrote a piece for MRC-TV reporting how in one Arizona morgue, there were about 850 unidentified bodies of migrant men, women, children, and infants who had died trying to come here illegally. They're sitting in a freezer because we don't know who they are or where to send them. Where's the outcry then when children are keeling over in the desert because we can't be bothered to secure our own border? Here's the simple truth. Donald Trump didn't kill Jacqueline, and neither did Border Patrol. She died because her dad dragged a 7-year-old 2,000 miles up from Guatemala through Mexico, across the U.S. border, and through the desert. She died because she didn't have adequate food, water, or medical care. She died because somewhere during all of this, she picked up an infection from God only knows where that no one could stop. But rather than wait for that very reasonable explanation, Democrats immediately rushed to blame U.S. Border Patrol agents and label them murderers. These are the same border agents, mind you, who are responsible for processing up to 500,000 illegal aliens every year, who are constantly rescuing people from the desert and hot trailer cars and stash houses, or fishing them out of the Rio Grande and medevacing them to local hospitals, all on our dime, by the way. But liberals would rather blame them and use the body of a little dead girl to score political points than fix the problem that led to her death in the first place. And until they decide to put people before politics, the morgues will continue to fill, and more children like Jacqueline will pay the price. And that's your Reality Check, America.
Time for my final thought. Now, late last week, a 7-year-old girl named Jacqueline Makin arrived at the United States border after traveling thousands of miles from Guatemala. Now, 2 days after being taken into custody by U.S. Border Patrol agents, young Jacqueline died in a Texas hospital. Now, the past few days have shown a light on just how perilous the journey has been for Central American migrants, but also on the abject poverty that many of them are trying to escape. She didn't own her first pair of shoes until a few weeks ago when her family decided to set out for the United States to start a new life. Her family got by on $5 a day harvesting corn and beans. Her father had to borrow money just to pay a human smuggler to help his family reach the border. Now, when detained, Jacqueline appeared healthy, which is why her death has raised questions. She became sick on the bus ride to the Border Patrol station and died 19 hours later with swelling on the brain and liver failure. Autopsy results could take weeks. In the meantime, her family is left wondering what happened. Now, it's telling that any family would subject themselves and their loved ones to such a perilous journey in search of a better life. For as much as people talk of the American dream, it's more than that for some people. People willing to risk life and limb to get here are doing so for a reason. These are not the criminals and terrorists many politicians have portrayed. Is what we have really that much better than the lives some leave behind? In some cases, yes. So what do? Put our hands around ours to protect it like a kid on the playground, or see if we can help somebody? Set aside how you feel about our immigration policy. This isn't about that. This is about poverty, desperation, and indifference. Because as long as we have those, immigration will always be a problem.
The family of the 7-year-old Guatemalan girl who died in Border Patrol custody earlier this month will get to say their final goodbyes very soon. This as an investigation into the child's death is underway. Border reporter Oscar Margain has more in tonight's Border Brief.
In this Border Brief, death of a migrant child. The body of Jacqueline McKean is reportedly being transported from Laredo, Texas to Guatemala to her mother and extended family. On Friday, the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Inspector General launched an investigation into the girl's death. According to Border Patrol, Jacqueline and her father were taken into custody after crossing the New Mexico border illegally the night of December 6th. 8 hours later, she began suffering from seizures and a high fever that led to her hospitalization in El Paso, where she later died. Her father disputes Customs and Border Protection claims that the child had been dehydrated for days. It is unclear if Jacqueline was fed during her time in custody. DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen will go before Congress Thursday. That's your Border Brief. I'm Oscar Margain reporting.
It was standing room only at a Comstock Township Board meeting tonight. People packed the room to voice their opinions about migrant workers in that community. 24-Hour News 8's Brady Gillum has more on that debate.
Well, Brian, good evening. Word got out that a local business wants to house dozens of migrant workers right here in Comstock Township.
They voted for you to get in here to help them, and you ain't helping them.
Passions flared as people took to public comment at the Comstock Township Board meeting tonight.
A family in Comstock. I have also, point of order, ma'am.
Winkey Greenhouses will start housing 34 migrant workers next month as part of the H-2A program. Workers will live in 4 houses the greenhouse owns within the township.
We're very much struggling to have people to come to work with the seasonal nature of the jobs that we do and the hours that we work. There's just not a lot of people that want to come do these kind of jobs anymore.
Word got out today, and people crammed into the board meeting to express their opinions.
And, you know, I do gotta say, it sounds like, you know, y'all are working through some nuanced issues here.
Biggest concern for me, I'm a mom, the safety of my kids, as all of these migrant work camp houses are going to be housing all men, males, no families, no women, no children, just men for 10 months out of the year.
Danielle says she's also concerned about her property value, but her family is her main priority.
My biggest fear is just the fact that these gentlemen will be among our community on my street. I have a daughter who goes out to a barn and works with her horses. I don't know if I can let her be out there by herself at this point.
The people that are coming have been vetted. They will have gone through background checks. Everything that they're doing here will be very much under scrutiny to make sure that they follow the rules.
Now, those 34 migrant workers will start living in Comstock Township in January. Also in January, Winkey will apply for housing on their farm. Reporting in Comstock Township, Brady Gillum, 24-Hour News 8.
That Migrant Caravan is now just south of our border. Mexico, well, they're holding a job fair for the migrants, and they're helping them file for asylum in Mexico. Come on in, former DHS Chief of Staff Chad Sweet. Chad, this is now Mexico's problem, right?
It is, and again, a tremendous credit to the administration, Secretary Nielsen and Secretary Mattis for holding the line that has now forced the asylum seekers to stay on the Mexican side of the border. And what that's done, Stuart, is if you're seeking asylum, you have to have a credible claim of fear. All these asylum seekers now have to explain why their credible claim of fear couldn't be addressed by staying in Mexico as opposed to the United States. So that's really winnowed out of the vast majority of the applicants to only those true core few, and that's why we see the caravan dissipating. So this is an early Christmas present to the American people that should be greatly appreciated.
But Mexico has played a role in this. They must be cooperating if they're doing a jobs fair and allowing people to stay, get asylum in Mexico. They're playing their part as well, just as our president demanded.
It's a huge issue. When I was Chief of Staff at Homeland Security, we were always frustrated because they don't even have their own border patrol. And so I think what they saw when their own southern border was overwhelmed, we all saw the videos of that. They're now taking this very seriously, and I think it cannot be overstated how impressive, what a diplomatic coup it's been that Secretary Nielsen of DHS, working with the Mexican government, was able to get that kind of cooperation, especially from a new incoming administration in Mexico, the AMLO administration. That's one that ran on a platform that was, the rhetoric was a little bit anti-American. So to do this behind the scenes, it does show that the U.S. and Mexico are collaborating in a very close way.
Chad, it looks to me like President Trump won in the sense that most of the migrants did not get in, and there's no more migrant caravans on the way, at least not that I've seen or heard reported. That's another form of Trump win.
It's a huge deterrent signal. I mean, if you look at it, no one died. Yes, there was the use of tear gas, but again, non-lethal force to maintain and hold the line at the border. If they had not held the line at the border, we would have seen more encouragement, more waves of these types of incidents. And that's why we just saw this horrible death of this tragic death of this child, the 7-year-old. That's the kind of thing that's incented if we don't hold the line like this. So the compassionate, caring thing to do is hold the line. I come from a state that's a border state in Texas where we have a saying, you know, good fences make good neighbors. And I think the Mexican government appreciates that.
Now, what about the possible government shutdown if President Trump does not get the $5 billion that he wants for the wall? Is it worth shutting down the government for a wall? What says Chad Sweet?
Well, if you look at it, the deterrent signal that just got sent could have been done much more effectively had that been in place. And what the president's asking for, when I was chief of staff, you know, look at what we did. When I came in, out of 6,000 miles of border, there were only 73 miles of fence. We built 670 miles of fence, but we did it talking to each of the border sector chiefs, the boots on the ground commanders, to tell us where they needed it. At $5 billion, the president is not asking for a sea to shining sea fence or wall. What he's asking for is strategically placed infrastructure. And so that's why I think in the end, if it's necessary, a shutdown could happen. But remember, 75% of the government's already funded through September of next year. So we're only talking about 25% of the government that could be affected. The president's leverage is better now than it will be in a year from now.
Well said. Chad Sweet, thank you very much for joining us, sir. We appreciate it. See you soon.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
In the meantime, angel moms and victims of violence from illegal aliens rally at the border in San Diego, supporting President Trump's efforts to build the wall. One America's Pearson Sharp has this report.
I'm Pearson Sharp. I'm here at the southern border in San Diego, where victims of illegal immigrants are rallying in favor of the wall. Angel moms from around the country gathered at the San Diego border to express their support for President Trump. Many at the rally were victims of violence at the hands of illegal aliens and say their children would still be alive today if the U.S. was allowed to enforce its own borders.
Angel families decided that we needed to do a press conference here at a port of entry, especially in light of what happened at the White House the other day with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. We want to let President Trump know that Angel Families backs his plan up to shut down the government until we get border funding for our wall. Nancy Pelosi talks all the time about what a waste of money the wall is, but what Nancy Pelosi fails to do is talk about what will happen if we don't build a wall. As far as I'm concerned, my son's life was priceless, and he didn't deserve to die the way that he did. And so this is why Angel Families wanted to come here and make our point and tell our politicians to get off their duffs, that they need to start doing something to protect Americans, and not one more American life should be lost at the hand of an illegal criminal.
So a lot of people talk about, well, they bash on President Trump for separating families, you know, here at the border. But you're here representing the angel moms, mothers who had their children killed by illegal immigrants. That seems like that's the ultimate separation. What are your thoughts on that?
You want to talk about separation of families? This is separation of families. My only son, Ronald Da Silva, was murdered by a previously deported illegal alien. That's why we need the border. Because after he was deported, he came right back in and committed the murder. My son would still be alive today if we had better security and better protection at the border.
Also at the rally was Ben Berquam, president of Fight Sanctuary State and founder of Frontline America, a group dedicated to spreading awareness about the importance of border security. He explained that with over 80,000 suspected terrorists apprehended at the border, the safety of American citizens depends on controlling who comes in and out of our country. If we can't secure our borders, what's at stake here?
Our entire country.
I mean, I'm not overstating it when I say that we're going to lose this country if we don't fix this problem. If you support President Trump, if you support this country, it's time for every American to stand up. We need more people out there, unafraid to stand up and say what they believe, stand for this country. If you don't do it now, you have nobody to blame when this country falls in the future.
This has been approved. Border security and the border wall has been approved since Reagan days. What the hell have our politicians been doing for decades?
For many, like Agnes Gibney, it's already too late to save her son. But she hopes that stories like hers will inspire Washington to take action to prevent the needless deaths of any more American citizens.
The guy that murdered my son will be out in 1 year and 4 months. He'll have a life. He can join his family. My son will still be 6 feet under. How fair is that? Because our government are not protecting our borders, the sovereignty of our country. They let my family down. They let my family down.
Pearson Sharp, One American News.
Let's bring in now House Majority Whip Steve Scalise of Louisiana. Great to see you today, Congressman. You know, when you hear Senator Schumer and Nancy Pelosi on the House side say that there are not the votes for this, Senate not so surprising. Why is the story so different on the House side?
Well, Harris, it's good to be with you. And I think you saw Chuck Schumer having another one of his tantrums. You know, there was a Schumer shutdown not too long ago, and he didn't fare too well from that. And he won't fare too well here again. You know, when he's saying he wants to deny the president the ability to build the wall. Look, the president ran on securing America's border. This fight is about securing America's border, not just the wall. It also includes other technology that's being mentioned to scan vehicles, but also to protect our Border Patrol agents. Because, Harris, you see with this caravan that's coming over, Homeland Security has already identified more than 600 convicted criminals in the caravan, and they've been attacking our Border Patrol agents. We need to make sure they have the money to be safe, doing their job, keeping America safe.
Yeah, you know, there are competing optics in all of this and reality. So you're talking about the groups of caravans now, some 6,000 to 7,000 people who are clustered in Tijuana waiting to get into our country. And then you also have the death of a little 7-year-old who was in the custody of the United States after crossing over illegally. It is difficult at this point to come up with answers. So what will it take?
Well, and it was a horrible tragedy to see what happened to the baby that was being brought over, part of the caravan as they were coming over in Mexico. They weren't taking proper care of the people that are coming over. And what the president has said is, look, if you're seeking asylum, there is a legal way to do it. But frankly, the people that are in this caravan were offered asylum and jobs by the Mexican government, and they turned that down. So it's not about asylum. This is about the rule of law. There's a legal way to come to America. Just follow that process. Don't be part of a caravan that's, again, infiltrated by a lot of convicted criminals and potential terrorists. Every day, on average, 10 known terrorists try to enter America. This is about keeping America safe.
Congressman Scalise, what do you make of Senator Dick Durbin's offer to spend just $300 million rather than border wall type money like $5 billion for searching vehicles in a different way? Is that taking seriously on Capitol Hill?
Well, I'm glad that he's at least recognizing that you have to be more creative about securing the border and acknowledging that people do come over to bring drugs. There's a lot of human trafficking that happens across the border. In fact, last year, our ICE agents, which Pelosi wants to get rid of, ICE actually saved more than 900 kids from human trafficking. This is really going on our border. It's about border security. There's a legal way to come here. Follow the law if you want to come here. But we've got to make sure that we're securing the border. President Trump is committed to securing our border. Well, let's just stand up for rule of law.
Have you talked with the president recently about this topic and just gauged how serious he is about a partial shutdown?
I did. I talked to the president about this a few days ago, and he's very passionate about this. He cares about securing America's border. He talked about it and campaigned on it. And, of course, it was an integral part of the election when he ran against Hillary Clinton. The American people knew this was one of the things that was front and center, that you've got a president saying he's going to try to keep America safe. And it's important that we secure the border. It's a bipartisan issue. Wherever you stand on immigration policy in general, most people in this country do believe you ought to secure the border. There's funding that goes along with it. Let's make sure we get the president the money he needs to keep America safe.
Well, I hear a lot of positivity in your voice. I mean, when I brought up Dick Durbin, you see the positive nature of, well, at least they're looking at the situation because they have to, Democrats on the other side of the aisle. I want to give you last word on what happens, the optics, who gets blamed if the government is a partial shutdown, and how many people that truly does affect, because the numbers are moving.
Well, Harris, I think it's real important that we continue to let the American people know just what is happening at the border, just what kind of people try to come over illegally. Some might be coming over here for work, but some are coming here to bring drugs, to human traffic, to prey upon our young children. And there are clear examples. Again, last year alone, our ICE agents saved over 900 kids from human trafficking. So this is happening at the border. There's a legal way to come to this country if you want to seek asylum. Or if you want to stand in line like millions of other people that are waiting to come here legally. America's a nation of immigrants, but we're also a nation of laws. Let's stand up for the rule of law and keep America safe.
House Majority Whip Steve Scalise, this holiday season, thank you for your time.
So Corey Lewandowski was floating the idea of maybe the military funds this whole thing to build the wall. Take a look.
But if the president has to use the military to build this wall or use funds from the military, then let's do that, because there's nothing more important than the sovereignty of our country.
All right, so the military does it. To former deputy assistant to the Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, Amber Smith. Can they do that, Amber?
Well, repurposing previously allocated funds from a government budget has happened before. It's not unprecedented. It actually happens quite frequently. It's just usually approved by Congress. So what we saw from the president's tweet earlier last week was that it was an idea that he threw out there. He's saying, if Congress doesn't want to negotiate with me, I'm going to find an out-of-the-way box to solve this problem. Building the wall was President Trump's #1 campaign promise to the American people, and people voted for him on that issue. So I think what he wants to do is he wants to find a way to make it happen when Congress has been blocking him every single step of the way. And so he's going to try to find another way. I think the administration is looking into legalities right now in terms of ways that they can actually make this happen. But right now it's just an idea. There hasn't been any sort of formal policy proposal just yet. But I think if things are okay legally, then maybe they will see in the future if they can move forward with it.
All right. Now, I don't know the legalities with that. So I've heard from people that say he can't do that, and others that say, yeah, he can do it. To your point, it's just reappropriating funds already designed. But your old boss, I mean, would Jim Mattis go along with that?
Well, right now, I think the same people who said that it was illegal to send troops to the border to help with the Customs and Border Patrol in the wake of the caravan coming up, the troops have been sent to the border under President Bush, under President Obama. So it really is just a polarizing issue of politics.
This is different than that, right? I mean, this would be if the president got his wish and had all $25 billion put aside, the eventual cost of such a wall or border, that would be very different, right?
Well, I think probably the biggest problem is first of all, this is being looked at in through a national security lens. This isn't just an immigration issue. This is a national security issue. And as the commander-in-chief, his #1 job is to protect the American people. And if that means moving the military to build a structure that's going to protect the American people, then that's the way that he will pursue this. But where this gets a little bit tricky is the military is already spread extremely thin with all of the conflicts that we are involved in around the globe. So if you're going to take a significant chunk of the military, provide them with a new mission on the southern border, much larger than what we're seeing in terms of numbers today, then you're going to have to take them and remove them from a different part of the world that they're already obligated and have a mission going on there. So that's going to be the #1 thing in terms of how are you actually going to reshuffle where troops are, their equipment, equipment, their deployment schedules, all of that doesn't just happen overnight. And that logistically is a major challenge. So that, I think, is going to be the second thing, aside from the defense budget and funding and the legalities in terms of Congress. It's going to be, okay, what part of the world are we going to be pulling troops from or activating reserve and guard troops to move them to the border?
All right, Amber, thank you very much. Amber Smith, the former Deputy Assistant to Secretary Jim Mattis, the Defense Secretary of the United States.
Did the Border Patrol just kill a 7-year-old for fun?
No! Let's the news.
I got a Washington Post push alert this week. The headline, 7-year-old migrant girl taken into Border Patrol custody dies of dehydration, exhaustion. That headline sure made it sound like a 7-year-old died at the hands of Border Patrol. But reading into the story suggests that's not what happened, Amber.
A week ago, a 7-year-old girl from Guatemala crossed over the U.S. border with her father illegally, where they then surrendered to border agents.
The pair were a part of a group of 163 people who were taken into custody. So, for hours, the Border Patrol were processing all of the people that they had captured.
The young girl was apparently only in Border Patrol custody for a little over 8 hours. So how exactly is it possible that Border Patrol is to blame for her suffering from exhaustion, dehydration, and starvation?
The truth is, Border Patrol revealed that it was days of not having food or water that ultimately led to the girl's death. Border Patrol did everything they possibly could in order to save the girl. They flew her on a medevac to a children's hospital in a last-ditch effort to save her life.
In fact, they were even able to revive her at one point, but she later died at the hospital. The Washington Post report also doesn't reveal whether or not Border Patrol gave her food and water when she was already in custody, or what the extent of her medical care in custody was.
So all of the details that we just shared with you are all available inside of the Washington Post reporting, which is a good thing. The problem is how the story's been framed. Both the headline and the body of the piece go out of their way to make it seem like the Border Patrol is culpable for the death of this young girl.
The reality is that the real people responsible are, 1, the girl's family, and 2, U.S. immigration policies that encourage people to make a dangerous trek with their children, hoping for this last-ditch effort of asylum.
So the way to fix this is, number 1, every parent knows you shouldn't subject your child to something that can truly imperil their life.
And number 2, don't create legal incentives for people to endanger their families and break the law with the expectation that they're going to be allowed to stay in the United States.
The Washington Post should have covered this the way it deserved to be covered, which is, yes, someone died. That's a tragedy. But it wasn't the fault of Border Patrol, or at least they haven't concluded that. So maybe when a 7-year-old dies crossing into the United States, the Washington Post and other media should actually take a moment and reflect on what are the conditions we created that allowed something like this to happen?
And not use it as an opportunity to attack Border Patrol.
I'm Vince Colonnese.
I'm Amber Athey.
And we just unfucked the news.
The border wall remains a top focus ahead of a looming government shutdown. One America's Alex Salvi takes a look at the lawmakers taking to the airwaves to give their last-minute arguments.
As the government shutdown looms, the fight for a southern border wall continues, with both sides standing firm on their positions. White House senior advisor Stephen Miller said on Sunday that the administration is willing to do whatever necessary to build a wall, even if that includes shutting down the government at the end of the week.
We're going to do whatever is necessary to build the border wall to stop this ongoing crisis of illegal immigration.
And that means
this is a very, if it comes to it, absolutely. This is a very fundamental issue. At stake is the question of whether or not the United States remains a sovereign country, whether or not we can establish and enforce rules for entrance into our country. The Democrat Party has a simple choice. They can either choose to fight for America's working class or to promote illegal immigration. You can't do both.
Meanwhile, Senate Democrat leader Chuck Schumer took to the airwaves as well, pushing back against the Trump administration's demands for $5 billion to start the construction of a physical barrier.
We Democrats, Leader Pelosi and I, offered the president 2 options as to how to avoid the shutdown. And we should not let a temper tantrum, threats, push us in the direction of doing something that everybody, even our Republican colleagues, know is wrong.
The New York lawmakers said that Democrats would offer up to $1.6 billion for the administration's request and hasn't budged on that figure. The standoff comes after a heated exchange in the Oval Office last week in which President Trump said that the need for a wall at the southern border is so severe that he's willing to take responsibility for the shutdown in order to get it done.
You know what I'll say? Yes,
If we don't get what we want, one way or the other, whether it's through you, through a military, through anything you want to call, I will shut down the government.
Okay,
absolutely.
fair enough.
And I am proud, and I'll tell you what, I am proud to shut down the government for border security, Chuck.
With the White House adamant about getting funding for a border wall and Democrats standing firm on their obstruction, some lawmakers say that there could be a compromise made in regard to border enforcement.
Well, there are a lot of things you need to do with border security. One is a physical barrier, but also the technology, the manpower, the enforcement, all of those things. And our current laws are in some ways an incentive for people to come to this country illegally, and they go through great risk and possibly great harm.
With Democrat votes needed in the upper chamber to get the spending bill through, some moderate Republicans are saying that the rewards aren't worth the risks when it comes to making demands ahead of the deadline.
There's absolutely no excuse to shut down government on this issue or any other issue. I have suggested that we revisit a compromise proposal that we brought forth earlier this year.
About a quarter of the government would be affected by a government shutdown, including the Department of State, Justice, Homeland Security, and Transportation. The Senate returns to Capitol Hill on Monday following a 3-day absence, with the House returning from an extended break on Wednesday night. Lawmakers will have until Friday, December 21st, to pass a series of funding bills to avert a government shutdown, whether it's with or without a border wall. Alex Salvi, One America News.
I will have enough days of my life to thank them for what they have done, for making this a reality.
Now on Night Beat, tears of joy and tight embraces. A Bay Area nurse returns home to her children after being deported to Mexico more than a year ago. And good evening to you. I'm Juliette Goodrich. Brian is off tonight. Night Beat's Andrea Borba is live at SFO with more on the reunion, 17 months in the making.
By her 4 kids, Maria Mendoza Sanchez stepped foot back onto American soil for the first time since her deportation in August 2017.
This is really a dream that I never expected was going to come true.
Maria was selected in an H-1B visa lottery and got a waiver to come back to the U.S. By Highland Hospital in Oakland, where she worked as an oncology nurse. She says her coworkers brought her strength in the darkest hours.
There were many nights I couldn't sleep. There were many days I was ready to give up. And when that happened, it just happened that one of them would reach out to me. Never let me down.
Maria says when she and her husband left SFO bound for Mexico in 2017, she knew what not to do.
I'm glad that I didn't turn around when I say goodbye to my kids. I saw the little video where they were crying and they were really in bad shape. They were with my coworkers, and I think that if I have turned around and seen that much pain, I wouldn't have been able to live.
Maria's eldest daughter, Vianney, herself a DACA recipient, stepped in to care for her other children.
It was very difficult to take on that motherly role because at the same time I'm their kid too, and I lost my parents too.
Because of her status, Vianney was never able to visit her mom in Mexico. Maria and her husband missed many moments here, including Maline's college graduation with a degree in human biology.
All my friends were celebrating with their families, and I couldn't see my parents in the stands.
While her husband is still in Mexico, she is home for the holidays and at least the next 3 years.
Well, I don't know yet what I'm going to be doing, but I know I'm going to be with them, and that's already, like, I think, at least for me, the best Christmas ever.
That was Andrea Borba reporting. East Bay Congresswoman Barbara Lee issued a statement reading in part, Maria's unjust deportation was a loss for her family, loved ones, and our entire East Bay community. Our immigrant neighbors are a part of what makes our East Bay community so special.
The Mueller witch hunt goes on. Leaks suggesting that Mueller still wants the president to sit down with a special counsel for an interview. Rudy Giuliani, the president's lead attorney, making it clear, as he put it, that it would be over his dead body. Your thoughts?
Well, let's get Rudy Giuliani some vitamins and keep him alive then. And let's hope he
he was speaking in jest. But Rudy's right. I mean, this is somebody who came in as the president's personal attorney and said, I think I can meet with the Mueller team and see what else they need from us, maybe wrap this up. Yeah. And it just goes on and on and on. The other thing is, don't forget that the president has submitted answers to the Mueller questions. Those are submitted with his counsel. That's already been done. That's all done under oath. And I think that what happened today in these people giving Jim Comey a platform yet again so he can grandstand. He's a proven, renowned liar and leaker, sanctimoniously grandstanding, talking about the future and truth and the Constitution. Remember, he got fired.
I've got to be honest. I want the president to fire him again. Can that be done? To
Once
fire
is
him?
never enough. Well, in that case, the sequel would be
not
as
when
good
it comes
as the
to
original.
Comey.
Yes.
So let's turn to.
Seriously speaking, he was talking about the Flynn investigation, and he came out and he did what he always does. He's got to just go talk to the press. I guess he's selling his next book, but people aren't buying it, literally.
And turning to again the wall itself. That wall is so fundamental. That's to remind everyone, to the president, his campaign, his promises, and he alone understanding the urgency among all of the presidential candidates to secure our borders, our ports, and to remind people that nearly all of the marijuana, heroin, cocaine, methamphetamines, and now fentanyl are coming across that border. 70,000 ODs, deaths a year. And people want to debate a wall and securing that. That's where the Dems are. That's where the rhinos like Paul Ryan are.
That's where those who are resisting are. And I would remind them that walls work. Where you see them in Arizona, where they've been built in California, they work. They do deter people from coming over, and poison from flooding our borders as well. All this cocaine, as you say, the heroin, the fentanyl, et cetera. And the cost to this country, the cost of our heroin addiction and misuse disorders alone would pay for the wall and the border security many times over.
And there's no price on saving all of the lives and the devastation to our,
and border
particularly
security
our young
is national
people.
security. This is very simple, and it has an economic component. It has a safety component.
So the president is going to move ahead with this come hell or high water.
The president said last week, and he has not changed, that he is going to get this money one way or the other. And remember that the $1.6 billion from the Senate already from the summer, that's a great start. And the president has said that he will get this one way or the other, that he's going to make good on the promise, not because it was a campaign promise, because his first and solemn duty is to keep all of us safe.
Well, we remember why it was a campaign promise, because he wants to make America safe again, as I recall the motto from this president. Kellyanne Conway, always great to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lou.
We begin with families helping families left behind. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Lena Lai. Andrew is off tonight. It was one of the largest immigration raids in U.S. history. More than 100 workers arrested at an Erie County gardening company last June. Many were deported, leaving families and children behind. Ray Strickland is here now with how a Cleveland woman's making sure they're not forgotten, Ray.
That's right, Lena. This woman is making sure that they are not forgotten. After the raids, I should say, this woman, she was buying food for these families with money out of her own pocket. She has been there every step of the way with the help of volunteers and a Lakewood grocery store. But she says the aid is starting to run out, even though many of the families at a Norwalk trailer park are still struggling.
In June, we watched as federal agents arrested more than 100 undocumented immigrants at two Corso's Flower and Garden Center locations in Erie County. A trailer park in Norwalk was one of the areas affected the most. There, families were broken up as children lost one or both of their parents.
So a lot of them have not had enough money to go ahead and feed their families on a regular basis.
Almost immediately after the raids, Cleveland's Bella Sin, a Mexican immigrant herself, says she couldn't stand by and watch anymore.
We have 2 boxes of cilantro, we have 2 boxes of tomato, 1 box of onions.
Over the past 6 months, with the help of volunteers and La Plaza supermarket in Lakewood, she's helped raise thousands of dollars and donated hundreds of pounds of food to affected families.
We have had so much wonderful outreach that it gives us hope.
At the supermarket, Bella and other volunteers bought food for families at a discounted rate. A donation jar at the store helps feed at least 60 families every month, thanks to generous donations from people in the community.
We found like gift cards for $100, $200 for Walmart for us to go shopping.
And a box near the entrance has been flooded with donations, overflowing at times with food and clothes.
I understand the need.
The owner of the store, Adrian Ortega, says helping the people of Norwalk was the right thing to do.
I don't mind helping. It's part of it makes me feel good as a human being.
But there's still more that needs to be done. Bella says her last trip to Norwalk will be later this month as aid for the families runs out.
We're trying to at least give each family a $100 with gift card to Walmart so they can go shop for what they need.
Now, Bella says the status of many of the people arrested is still up in the air. She says families there will still need aid after she is gone. Now, she will give it to them on an as-needed basis, but she says you can help families by going to La Plaza Supermarket, and we will have more information on our website on how you can donate at WKYC.com.